Hello, everyone. Welcome and good morning. Good afternoon. My name is Manny. I'm the executive director for Inspire Washington, and I'll pass it off to Jesse. And my pronouns are he, him.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessie Wasson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Deputy Director from Inspire Washington. I am zooming in from Tukwila, and I'll pass it over to Madeline.
Hi everyone, I'm Madeline Dalton. I'm the Outreach Coordinator at Inspire Washington and I use she, her pronouns.
Inspire Washington acknowledges that we and our cultural partners statewide are on the homelands of Native peoples who have lived in this region since time immemorial. We pay respect to their elders, both past and present. We also acknowledge the traditional custodians and caretakers of the land where all of our cultural partners live and work. Currently, there are 29 federally recognized tribes that share traditional homelands and waterways in what is now Washington state. Some of these are nations and confederacies that represent multiple tribes and bands. Of course, actions are stronger and more powerful than sentiments. So, Inspire Washington pledges that we will, in the upcoming state legislative session, advocate for the renewal and the continued funding for the Tribal Cultural Affairs Program for the state. And we ask that all of you share in this advocacy effort so that we can make sure our tribes and our cultural culture bearers have the resources they need in Washington.
All right, so here's a little bit of our agenda for this session today. For the new folks, we will just give a very brief overview about Inspire Washington and what
I'm
we are and
yeah, go
what
ahead.
we
I'm just
do.
I'm on mute,
Oh,
but I'm listening to it.
I'm gonna mute that. There we go. But then we will dive right in and talk about federal funding. This webinar is all about the federal space, so that is where we're going to focus on. So no state legislative session at this meeting today. We're going to talk about federal funding. We're going to talk about the appropriation cycle, some bills, and some other issues that have come up recently that we want you to be aware of. We'll do a little overview of elections and what you can do and how you can participate in those this year. And also some advocacy opportunities for you as well as your community at the federal level. And of course, we'll have time for questions at the end.
Before we get started, I just really want to kind of have a leveling moment with you. I understand that there's been a lot going on in the federal space that affects all of us, not just as cultural workers, but as Americans. I know that there's been a lot of actions from the federal government that have been very harmful and disruptive, and I just want to recognize the challenges you and our cultural partners have faced statewide. And we just want to assure you that we are engaging through our work at Inspire Washington, making sure that we represent you in all of these spaces to ensure that there's a voice for Washington for cultural resources. Inspire Washington opens doors to science, heritage, and the arts. We are a nonprofit. We, like you, are driven by mission. Here is our mission statement. I'll give you a few moments to read through that. Founded in 2019 with the merger of two organizations, Cultural Access Washington and the historic Washington State Arts Alliance, Inspire Washington is your cultural advocacy organization. We exist to serve every state community, from Spokane to Seattle, from Kennewick to Kitsap, from Wenatchee to Whatcom. We serve communities by supporting all of you. You are our cultural partners. You are the ones that inspire Washington communities every day in every region of the state with your programs in science, heritage, and the arts.
At Inspire Washington, we have a very big cultural tent. When we talk about the cultural sector, this is who we support. The first being science and technology, which includes nature conservancies, fish hatcheries, zoos, science, innovation centers, and aquariums. If you are here today representing science, please raise your virtual hand. We'd love to see you out there. Our second bucket of work is heritage, which includes historical and cultural heritage sites, humanities, and museums. Awesome. Humanities and heritage. Raise your hands. Join the club. That's great. And of course, the arts, which includes visual art, literature, music, dance, theater, spoken word, film, and non commercial radio. Arts folks, raise your hands. I know you're out there. Awesome.
What does Inspire Washington do every day and year round? Coalition building. We are connecting galleries in Friday Harbor with the Symphony in Yakima and music venues in downtown Spokane. We are building a big cultural team and directing our imagination on shared objectives. Advocacy. It is the most important thing we do. Advocacy ensures that someone is sticking up for you, the cultural sector, and representing us within every space where decisions are made and our public resources will be distributed. But what's next? What other resources need to be developed so that your work may thrive? We always know that the cultural sector needs money, and we will advocate for that. But what about laws and policy? What is standing in your way? We want to know. We also know that you crave and rely on community within the industry. Our education programs, mostly statewide webinars like this, provide networking and professional development opportunities. And Madeline, she's our advocacy coordinator. She's always developing toolkits to make your advocacy, your communications work easier. We are committed to representing science, heritage, and arts organizations across Washington by spending more time listening. We love showing up in person and working in towns and communities across the state. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, Madeline, can you fix this slide
Yeah,
a
I
little bit?
don't know what happened to that slide, everyone. Please hold. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and see if it shows up on my normal desktop, and if not, then we'll figure something out and see what's
I
going
can
on.
try to share it too.
Yeah, let me see if it looks. Okay, it looks normal when I'm not in presentation mode, so let's see what happens. Sorry, everybody. Okay, yeah, when I'm in present. Oh, aha! There are effects on the slide. That's what happened. Okay, so that's a fun surprise. I'll just know that there are effects on it and we'll keep going. Thanks for bearing with us, everybody.
Okay, great. Oh, maybe, there we go. Okay, great. So here's here's our slide about arts and cultural funding from the federal level all the way down to our local funding level at cities and counties. So I want to kind of level set so everyone understands all the different players within this space and also the way that money flows from the top at our federal level in Congress in Washington, D.C., all the way down to our cities and towns. So there's a lot of players in this, and most of it all starts with the federal congressional budget. And in those dark blue boxes, you can see those are the advocacy partners that work to ensure that that funding exists. So we have folks like Americans for the Arts, National Humanity Alliance, as well as Inspire Washington. We are all doing advocacy to ensure that there is money at the federal level for the cultural agencies. From there, from the federal budget, money is then distributed to our three cultural agencies, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the National Endowment for the Humanities. And all three of them function a little bit differently. The Institute of Museum and Library Services gives funds directly to organizations all across the country, and also other programs and things like that. But it is not distributed to our state, to the state level. But the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities does distribute funding to cultural sector work at the state level. So the NEA, National Endowment for the Arts, gives 1.2 million every year to our state arts agency, ArtsWA, as well as this last year, National Endowment for the Humanities gave $658 million to our state humanities council, Humanities Washington. And then, of course, we all probably know that then from there, ArtsWA and Humanities Washington distributes funds all across the state to organizations as well as programs.
I'm sorry, Jesse, can I just interrupt? You accidentally said million, not 658 million.
So I'm sorry, 658,000. Thank
I
you.
wish, I wish.
I wish, right? Maybe someday. Sorry, thank you. Um, so the NEA and the NEAs distributes funds. And then also our state budget every year within our state legislative session, our state allocates funding to ArtsWA and sometimes to Humanities Washington. So the way that the funding from the NEA works is the federal government appropriates a certain amount of money to the National Endowment for the Arts. From that, 40% of that is then distributed by population to states all across the country. And then the other 60% of that fund is distributed to programs and individual organizations all across the country. This last year, that funding level was $207 million, which was the same level for the National Endowment for the Humanities. And then from there, ArtsWA distributes to individual organizations and artists, as does Humanities Washington. And then you also can see in the red bucket, local funding, of course, is distributed like Cultural Access or LTAC or any other local funding sources. So this is kind of the map as to how funding flows all through our state. So all that to say, money at the federal level is really important. It sets the baseline for funding all across the rest of the country at every level. So that is why Americans for the Arts, the Arts Action Fund, the National Humanity Alliance, as well as Inspire Washington and many, many other advocacy partners work tirelessly to ensure there is federal funding for our 3 cultural agencies every year. Okay, I'm going to try my best to give a really brief overview of all of the changes that have happened to our 3 federal cultural agencies since last year. Since Trump took office, we all know that many things have changed. I'm going to give a little overview with the National Endowment for the Humanities. Back in April 2025 of last year, many grants were terminated, including all of the funding that goes to the state humanities councils. Immediately following, there was a lawsuit that was filed by the American Council of Learned Societies, the American Historical Association, as well as the Modern Language Association. They all filed a federal lawsuit together, challenging the dismantling of the NEH. While that lawsuit was happening, grants were cut back to 50%. And that is all that our humanities councils have received since then, is 50% of their regular award. So that $658,000 that I shared, that is half of what they used to get. And that is where it has stayed ever since that lawsuit was filed last May. But very recently, in fact, just a little over a month ago, that lawsuit that was filed last May finally came to a conclusion. And the federal judge ruled that the cancellations were unconstitutional under the First and Fifth Amendment and ordered the reinstatement of all of those grants that had been terminated. So this is a complicated, of course, we're very excited about it, but it is a very complicated thing. And the fact that all of these grants were last year, right? So many of those programs don't exist anymore, or they've moved on, organizations have moved on from those programs, things like that. So, and obviously the state humanities councils will ensure that they want to get those funds, but the NEH is now in the process of reaching out to all of those individual organizations to see, do you still want this money, or what do you want to do with this money? It's kind of a year later, a complicated process. But that's where we are with the NEH funding as far as the lawsuits and all of the crazy things that happened last year. For the NEA, National Endowment for the Arts, a similar story, but a lot of the changes that came to the NEA were more around how the funding was distributed, specifically gender ideology as well as DEI. There's a lot of changes that were made to the kind of underlying guidelines of the grants. There were several grants that were canceled or terminated, as the words that they used. And after many appeals, a lot of those grants were permitted to continue, including our grant. We had a grant through the NEA. And then in October of last year, the NEA changed its grant categories and guidelines as well. So now they are really shifting as far as what they're giving their money to. Institute of Museum and Library Services, back in March of 2025, the executive order said to completely eliminate IMLS completely. There was, again, a lawsuit that was filed and a preliminary injunction made that was brought on by different AG offices all across the country. The court did block that, thankfully, and ordered the IMLS to restate those grants, their staff, which were also cut way back, and to reinstate those grants because of the lawsuit. Eventually, it was just a couple months ago now, April, the Trump administration did settle that lawsuit and agreed not to dismantle IMLS, thankfully, and now the staff is back at about 50%. So still a lot of impacts, very it's kind of shook the cultural sector to our core to think that all of these agencies that do so much great work all across the country would be cut back or even eliminated. But thankfully, all of these lawsuits prevailed, and all of these agencies still exist and still operate today. Some at a much lower level and some very differently than they used to. But they are still here, and we will still continue to advocate for these funds as I believe it is a basic right as an American to have funding for cultural programs.
All right. Thank you, Jesse, for that. So now that you've gotten a breath and a really high-level overview of the actions of the government, now I want to share what we do at Inspire Washington as the state's cultural agency to represent all the great work in all of our communities. So first of all, I just want to give you a really high-level overview of our work in this space. Because I know you hear us talk a lot about the state legislative session, but yes, we are also very active in federal government advocacy. So who do we work with? We actually work with a lot of people at the federal level. But our primary conveners that we work with nationally are Creative West, formerly WestAF, the Western Arts Federation. Creative West, of course, their geographical jurisdiction is the 13 Western states and the 3 Pacific jurisdictions. But they convene all the advocacy organizations in that broad American region so that we can be focused together as one big, powerful advocacy effort. We also convene under Americans for the Arts. I'm the state captain for this Washington for Americans for the Arts. So imagine a Zoom room with organizations like Inspire Washington for every state. We meet regularly talking about federal objectives, federal happenings, and also we talk a lot about tactics and strategy to address some of these harmful things that have been coming from the administration. The Arts Action Fund is the C4, the more political sister to Americans for the Arts. So they focus more on the direct lobbying as well as voter education programming. A cultural advocacy group is not a formal organization. It's a coalition of all the cultural and arts service organizations like League of American Orchestras, Opera America, just on and on. There are so many service organizations. And what this group does, we participate in this. This group focuses on the different policy areas, and we form policy groups, and we do a variety of different types of activities like develop policy briefings. We discuss how to frame an opportunity and how to talk about it. In the last several years, we've spent more time than ever before talking about strategies and tactics for advocacy. The Creative States Coalition is an organization that serves state arts or cultural advocacy organizations. So those are like-minded organizations like Texans for the Arts or Californians for the Arts or Mass Create, where we work together just to strengthen our organizations and our advocacy role. Here's a list of what our regular activities are through the course of a year. We actually have a pretty robust and detailed federal work plan that we just move through every quarter of the year. But as you can see here, it's a variety of different key activities like strengthening relationships with the congressional offices in DC and the district offices that every one of our congressional members have here in the state. We submit appropriation requests. You're going to hear more about that next. We host town halls and roundtables with lawmakers when they're on recess. We track legislation and we provide sector feedback. We want our congressional members to understand if they pass a law, what it will mean for performing arts centers or ticket purchasers in Spokane and Seattle and Bellevue and Vancouver and Walla Walla or Pasco, for example. We do travel to DC. We make at least one trip a year for in-person advocacy. It's really important to show up. It also just gives us a greater context for how our cultural advocacy work fits into the broader scope of federal activity. This year, we plan to go to DC a little later in the year, but most likely in September. But of course, Our work is to drive grassroots advocacy. So there's a lot of different ways that we try to get you all involved. Um, for us to be most successful, it's not just because Inspire Washington is asking for something, it's because we are backed up with advocates across the state in every congressional district asking for support from their congressional lawmakers. So here you can see ways that we involve you in the process, voter education opportunities, policy feedback, action alerts. It's really important that you participate in our action alerts. And of course, we love bringing all of you, constituents, community members, into our in-person or virtual meetings with congressional offices and congressional lawmakers. This next slide here, I'm just going to provide a big overview of the appropriation process, the process in which the federal government creates a budget for the upcoming year. Um, the whole process kicks off. For those of you that work with us in state government, it's very similar to state government. We talk about the governor's budget, but here in the federal space, the budget process kicks off with the president's budget. The president's budget is a budget request to Congress, and then that kicks off a flurry of advocacy activity. Usually around the time the president submits the budget request, then a lot of advocates like us and advocates for all the countless policy areas show up in DC to start talking about the support that they need. Um, Throughout the spring and into early summer, appropriation bills start moving. Madeline's going to talk to you more about how we plug advocates into that. And then usually by throughout the summer, these appropriations are finalized, and by October 1st, they are supposed to have a new budget by the beginning of their fiscal year, but I got to be real. It doesn't often happen like that. As you can see on this visual, the average budget is approved 117 days late. On the average, they've only approved the budget on time 4 times in the last 50 years. So here are the key milestones for Inspire Washington is in February, we're really waiting for that president's budget because it's gonna start the conversation, set the tone. It's also from the president's budget that we will be able to finalize requests. We'll understand if we are pushing for something higher than what the president is recommending. April through May is the appropriation request cycle, and of course, meeting with congressional offices. And then we will be at this all summer long as we monitor the budget process as our congressional members start voting over the next month. And we'll be issuing action alerts at critical moments when we need to put pressure on our members of Congress. Of course, it's challenging for us at Washington State because we only have 12 members of Congress. They're very important members, but of course, that's all that we can do is just encourage our 12 Washington congressional members to vote in support of cultural appropriations. And while we're doing this, our friends at Californians of the Arts are doing the same thing with their approximately 50 members of Congress and so forth across the nation. By September, if all of this wraps up, you'll start to hear, the outcomes. We'll share where all of these budget requests landed. And also, of course, we're going to report out on how your congressional member voted for science, heritage, and the arts.
All right, so now let's talk about who exactly we are talking to, both as Inspire Washington and you as advocates with Inspire Washington. Before I get started, I just want to make it super clear what appropriations means if you're unfamiliar. That's essentially just a really fancy government word for how Congress spends the money that the federal government has. Which agencies are they going to give it to and how much? So obviously, as Manny said, the president releases their budget in February, and this is just a guideline. Nothing is set in stone, nothing is law. Then it's up to Congress to decide if they want to take that suggestion or do something different. So right after that budget comes out, we come in as advocates because each congressional office releases an appropriations form. It's like a Google form, some sort of online form with a bunch of questions, and it's very complicated. So we do our research, we get information from our partners at Americans for the Arts, about exactly what all of our appropriations requests are. I'm going to talk about those on the next slide. And we submit them to all of the offices that we possibly can. I also create appropriations guides that then I have sent to advocates just like you. Maybe some of you on this call even submitted these and saw that. Thank you so much if that's the case. And then you can also submit your appropriations forms to your congressperson with our guidance. Admittedly, I'm a little frustrated by how difficult these are for the average constituent to understand. So that is why we make these guides, to make it easier for you. Because if I didn't have the help from the Americans for the Arts, I don't even know if, as just an Inspire Washington staff member, I could complete this on my own. So we want to demystify that process and make it as democratic for you as possible. So I submitted these in March. And then in June and July, we followed up by meeting with staffers from DC. Each Congress member has staff in the district and in DC, so we chose DC staffers for the summer to meet with. We've already met with almost all of our House members. We'll meet with some senators very soon. And in between those two things, we actually had Karin from ArtsWA and Julie Ziegler from Humanities Washington also take meetings with these offices. So there's a really good rhythm of about once a month, somebody from Washington State coming in and reinforcing what our appropriations requests are. Now, obviously, certain people, depending on committee assignments and leadership positions, are going to have more power in the appropriations process than others within Congress. So you should know that Senator Murray is the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee. When the Democrats have control of the Senate, she is the committee chair of the Appropriations
Yes.
Committee? That's the term?
Yes.
Yeah.
She was
But
chair up
because
until 2 years ago.
Yes, but because now the Democrats are the minority in the Senate, she becomes a ranking member. And then on the House side, Representative Newhouse and Representative Gluesenkamp-Perez. So Newhouse is central Washington and Gluesenkamp-Perez is southwestern Washington, Vancouver, etc. area. Those two representatives are on appropriations committees without leadership positions. But of course, it's still important to talk to all members of Congress in our state about appropriations. So this is a breakdown of what we asked for. Thank you again to Americans for the Arts for providing us with this information. We followed their lead here. As you'll see, President Trump is proposing much lower numbers than what the House, the Senate are proposing, and also what they passed last year. So if you notice anything in red here, that means that President Trump is proposing a very low number because he wants to eventually sunset or shut down these oh my God, what's the word? Agencies. There we go.
Agencies.
Thank you. These agencies. And obviously we find this really troubling. These agencies are so vital for not only Washingtonians, but Americans at large getting access to arts and humanities. So we of course want to see much larger numbers. We are advocating for $213 million each for the NEA and the NEH. This is slightly higher than what we had last year, which was $207 million. And that was a number that was maintained from fiscal year 2025. So that was passed while Biden was in office. And then with Trump in office, we were actually able to maintain that amount of funding. So we are asking for a slight increase just to adjust with inflation, all of those types of things. But of course, it is up to Congress to decide. So last year, the House put forth the number $135 million, which is a pretty drastic cut, but definitely less concerning than what is in President Trump's budget. The Senate countered that with $207 million, and Congress together decided to actually hold to that higher number of $207 million. So this year, we've only heard from the House. The House has once again proposed $135 million. We have yet to hear from the Senate. But the vibe in terms of meeting with these DC staffers is relatively optimistic. They're feeling pretty hopeful that the Senate is going to counter with that higher number. And many folks, not all, but many in our Washington delegation are committing to supporting the highest number possible that comes across their desk, which is really exciting. Just to talk about what some of these other things are, the Bureau of Economic Analysis Arts and Culture Satellite Account is specifically funding to fill out these arts action, these Why the Arts Matter fact sheets that we have that talk about what percentage of the state's GDP goes towards the arts. Then we have the Institute of Museum and Library Services. There were two different programs within that. There's the Office of Museum Services, so where it says museums, 55 million, that's that program. And then 232 million, we're asking for the Library Services Technology Act. Then there's an Assistance for Arts Education grant program that we've asked for $40 million. And all those education requests below that are not arts specific, but those funds can be used for arts and science and humanities education, as well as other things. That's why those numbers are in the billions rather than the millions, because they're much broader pots of funding. And these, of course, go to various communities that are more disadvantaged. There are professional development funds for teachers, student support, supplies, so many different areas of learning that are so important to fund. And of course, any of those zeros that we're seeing suggested by President Trump are very troubling to us. We want to make sure that kids have as best access to arts education and education in general as they possibly can. So what did we do exactly this year? This year, I submitted appropriations forms to 10 out of our 12 congressional offices. The only reason I didn't do those remaining two, that was Representative Larson and Senator Cantwell, is that these deadlines for appropriations forms drastically changed this year. They were moved up way early, and we unfortunately did not get notice. So those two offices, we missed out on the opportunity. But for all the others, we were able to submit, and we submitted forms for all of those requests that you saw. Then we also scheduled meetings with staff for the entire House. We took those just a couple weeks ago. We had a bit of a scheduling snafu with Jayapal's office at the last minute, so I'm still working that out. So we've only met with 9 out of 10, but all the rest of those offices we met with. They were 30-minute meetings, again, with DC staffers, all virtual, and we brought constituents along with us. So there was one person from our staff in the room and then a handful of constituents, and they really led these meetings, talking about what's been going on in their community. And most of these folks have some sort of story when it comes to federal funding, whether they receive it directly from the NEA, NEH, IMLS, or they receive it from the state, from ArtsWA and Humanities Washington, which depends on NEA and NEH funding. Maybe they lost a grant. Maybe they're hesitant to apply for a grant now because of the DEIA and gender ideology executive orders are, endangering their staff or preventing them from doing the work that they want to do. Lots of different stories in those arenas that we're coming to these meetings with. And generally, we're really happy to report that Washington is a great state to live in when it comes to cultural support. We're doing quite well, especially compared to some other states. And the reactions in our delegation range from vague and non-committal about cultural issues to extremely enthusiastic and supportive. We do not have any massive opposition going on in our state, which is a great place to be in. Lots of good voting records.
Okay, I'm going to talk about one of the newest things that have happened recently, and that is the proposed changes to the Office of Business Management Guidance. That is a fancy way of saying the guidance that all grants, and I use that term very broadly, grants or any sort of programs or any money that is allocated from the federal government to something else, whether that is a school or a hospital or a nonprofit, it's very broad. So any funding that gets allocated from the federal government to another entity, those are the granting guidelines that they follow. So the OBM issued this giant proposal to completely essentially rewrite the way that those grants are given. They're very technical revisions, and there is hundreds of them. As I said, this is a 400-page document of so many changes. So I'm not going to go through all of those. It's also kind of complicated because there are a fair number of changes that were proposed in that document that are good. But I would say the vast majority of them are not. The main thing, the kind of biggest takeaway around this is that it will allow an administration to determine their federal awards based on partisan ideology rather than objective criteria and community needs. So, however, that party, that administration is in control at the time, they could decide how they want to give out money. So that is a huge shift. That is a really big change, and it is really scary to think about. So there has been a open public comment period for a couple months now. I think it first opened in the middle of May, and it now closes, as you'll see on this slide, on July 13th. Just to give you some context, normally when they open public comment for things like this, they get about 3,000 or 4,000 comments. For this, as of the week before 4th of July, they had 65,000 comments. So, needless to say, there is a lot of attention on this. There is a lot of feelings. There is a lot of so many different folks are now working on this issue. You know, as I said, from hospitals to schools to universities to business. I mean, there's a lot of people that will be affected by this. So, the reason why Inspire Washington, we have not done an action alert around this issue because it is a very complicated issue to explain because there are so many different parts to this bill and there are so many different things that we could say we don't like or we do like. It's honestly just very complicated. And given the vast number of people who are commenting all across the country from more educated fields than us, we are just talking to our members specifically as Inspire Washington staff members to make sure that we have a voice in this as well. What we're hearing is that a lot of these will happen because it's not, and it does not need to be approved by Congress because it is an agency thing. I mean, Congress could step in if they really wanted to, of course, but it does not need congressional approval. So a lot of these things, it sounds like will go through. We won't know for a little bit yet, but that is it's something to be aware of. We all, as a sector, need to be aware of it. Whatever does go through, whatever does pass, unless they make drastic changes, will go into effect on October 1, so this fall. Um, there has been so many people who have put out, broad sweeping action alerts around this. The one that we find most helpful is the one from the nonprofit council, the National Nonprofit Council. Is that the word? National Nonprofit Council. I think that's what they're called.
National Council, sorry, yeah, sorry.
National Council of
Council for
Nonprofits. That's what
Nonprofit.
it is. Thank you. Yeah. So I'll put that in the chat here in a minute if folks want to participate in that action alert. And you can read a little bit more, and I can put up. But even the cheat sheet of this is 14 pages long. So I'm just wanting to spare you all of the really nerdy technical things. But I'll put it in the chat for those of you who want to take a look. Yeah. So that's all I have to share about that issue right now.
All right. There are a number of policy areas that beg for legislation that would support cultural sector organizations and programming. We could spend a whole hour talking about the different policy areas, and I know we don't have that kind of time. So I'm just going to really lean into a couple of them that have a higher level of attention for us right now for a variety of reasons. Okay. So I want to start with ticketing legislation. Um, we have an objective. We have a problem to fix in Washington State and across the nation. We want to end price gouging. We want to end deceptive listings for events and the predatory resale practices. We also want to see enforcement of existing laws regarding bots and other consumer protection policies. Why do we want this? Because right now, organizations, small Washington businesses that hold cultural events and sell tickets, they are being taken advantage of. The second party market intercepts ticket sales, drives the price up, which of course creates potential bad will for the organization. And why is our national corporations making money, more money than the small Washington businesses that are serving Washington communities? That is a problem. It's also a problem for fans. If a ticket is $35, it should be $35. If it is $50, it should be 50. Or if it's 100, it should be 100. It should not be hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands of dollars. This is consumer fraud. Fans are being and audiences are being taken advantage of. I want to also clarify that everybody wants this. Artists want to make sure that their events are priced appropriately and their fans are being treated fairly. Fans want to pay a reasonable price. Of course, there's a cost for a ticket, but fans need to pay the fair cost. Venues want this, promoters, performing arts centers, universities sell tickets all across the spectrum. I think we all agree that this is a market that needs to be regulated so that people will have a fair experience. But unfortunately, there's no legislation that is giving us as Americans what we need in this area. There are two potential federal bills. Um, One is was has been created and by NEVA. They are the proponent for Fix the Ticks. NEVA is the National Independent Venue Association. NEVA was formed during the pandemic, and it's actually NEVA was a main driver in securing the 16 plus billion dollars that became the Shuttered Venue Operating Grant. So they are new to the scene, but they're making really good impact, and we love their Fix the Ticks bill. Our own Senator Cantwell has introduced a bill called the Ticket Act, but we feel that it's not ready. There's still a lot more work that needs to be done with it. It falls short of our main objectives of protecting small Washington businesses and fans. So we are thankful that Senator Cantwell is interested in this policy area, but we still need more collaboration to make that bill work for Washington. So you all watch the news. It's a challenging time in Congress to get legislation passed. There's strong divides in both the House and the chamber, and no, neither one has super majority to actually get things done. Um, so, although there's nothing moving immediately, here is the current state of play. Absent a federal legislation, many states are trying to pursue legislation at the state level. Some states have been successful, and we hope that Washington will be successful next. Ticketing legislation was a priority of ours in the last legislative session. We still fell short of getting legislation across the deadlines. We will work harder next year. Um, of course, we're supporting Fix the Tick, so we're monitoring that space to see if there's anything that we need to be able to, anything that we can do to drive that legislation in concert with our national partners, because of course we need a groundswell, all the states, to get majority support of Congress. And we have been reaching out to Senator Cantwell's office, asking for improvements for the Ticket Act, and we just haven't gotten very far with that yet, but we'll keep trying. But as of right now, it's not a bill that I'm worried is going to get passed and is not yet perfect. On June 18th, the unfair and deceptive acts and practices relating to circumvention of ticket access control measures, the longest name for law ever, that law took effect. We're still trying to understand what it could do and the effect it will have on ticket sales in Washington. It is our hope that there may be a foundation here to block all, if not some, of speculative ticket sales. So our lobbyist has reached out to the Attorney General's office so that we can have a meeting and really discuss what the enforcement of this is and the interpretation of it in Washington and what can be done from the state level to support this new federal law. Fix the Ticks is raising awareness about ticket fraud with Congress. You can learn more at fixtheticks.org. We're also going to do the same thing here in Washington State, by the way. But either with Fix the Ticks or through Inspire Washington's future platform that we're in the process of developing, we want people to complain. If you experience ticket fraud, we want you to complain and send lodge a complaint with the Attorney General's office. We also want you to send a letter to member of Congress. We've got to work in both of these spaces to advance efforts for federal legislation and state legislation, and we'll take what comes first. I know this is a complicated area, so I want to be clear about what we think is good policy. I'm not going to go through everything on this list, and you will have this PowerPoint afterwards, or you can go to Fix the Ticks. I got this graphic right from their website. But as you can see on the left, this is what we think is the foundation for good policy. These are the protections that fans need that are focused on the fan, the customer experience. And I want to remind you, of course, when I'm talking about fans and customers, I'm talking about folks that attend a Taylor Swift concert, a Beyonce concert. They go to the PNB. They may even buy a ticket to a museum. It's just all of the places where fans and patrons buy tickets, and every Washington community, because this is a problem in our small towns as well as in our big cities. All right, next I want to talk about artist visa legislation. historically, this has been a problem. The visa process through many administrations has been challenging. Many organizations want to bring artists from abroad to perform at festivals, to do residencies with their communities, a number of different things. But America's visa process is challenging. It requires hiring a lawyer sometimes, paying fees. There's a lot of uncertainty about when your visa for your visiting artist will be approved. And there's even been, mishaps at the border or, when somebody tries to drive in or fly into the United States to perform at a cultural festival, and there's been problems there. So I just want to point out that it's been a problem for a long time. And in the advocacy space, we have been advocating for a more speedy processing of artist visas. But boy, in this administration, with all of the attention on immigration and visas and the propaganda around that, it's only become worse. Concretely, the fees to process artist visas have gone up significantly in price. The wait time to get approval has gone on even longer. And now with the travel bans, that means that artists from certain countries are not allowed to come here, or processing the visa gets more attention and more critical attention, negative attention. And now the introduction of this idea of visa bonds, having to pay a bond for to secure a visa, or visa integrity fees. I mean, the bottom line is they're not incentivizing artists to come over. Uh, they're just making it harder. They're trying to make it more challenging so that people just don't come here. And this just doesn't affect tourists. It also affects cultural programming. So we have been advocating for a solution to this. Again, broadly, lots of people want this. Artists that want to come here want this. Organizations that are producing cultural events or festivals want this. Audiences want exposure to international creativity. And of course, the tourism sector really depends on all the great events that you all program and create. So they want this. And of course, the venues where artists from abroad will perform want this. Um, this is a difficult climate to get a solution right now, period. The administration has no interest in encouraging immigration or travelers from abroad. And of course, the Congress, under the control of the Republicans, are just, following the president's lead. So this is not a time that we can imagine change, but um, we're looking towards a midterm election. If there's some shakeup in control of the House or the Senate, then maybe there'll be new opportunities. This is a policy area that we're staying engaged in. We know that all across Washington that there's a number of producers that do events that bring artists from abroad, and they care about this. So the current state of play is administration has the authority, control, and alter the visa process. There's no political will or majority agreement. This policy area has really been corrupted by bad, incorrect storytelling, and we're just going to wait and see what happens next. If you want more information, here's a website, Artists from Abroad, or reach out to me, and we can talk more. And we're really grateful to Representative Jayapal. She hosted a roundtable. I brought all these great advocates to talk with her, since she is a leader in this policy area. Once we get through the federal budget process, then we'll work more with this group and others to figure out what our next steps are. But we really have to see what happens with elections.
Yeah, great. All right, here are a few bills that we are also tracking. There's two bills that I'm just going to bring to your attention today. There's, of course, many others. The Creative Workforce Investment Act. This is yet to be introduced, but it does have a couple lead sponsors and a few more co-sponsors. This bill would establish a $3 million grant program within the Department of Labor to help artists and independent creative workers. It gives them more funding for the creative workforce, and gives them more kind of training. And it's essentially, if for those of you who remember the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act a couple of years ago, we were advocating for creative workers to be included in that. That did not go anywhere. So therefore, we've created our own bill for the creative workforce, and that is what this bill is. So we'll keep you posted on if that moves. The Performing Arts Tax Parity Act, or also known as PAPPA, has been around a long time. I want to say 3 or 4 years or so is when it was first introduced. This has been introduced. This is championed by a representative from California. Essentially, what this bill would do, it will give artists higher deductions for business expenses like headshots and costumes and coaches and travel and all that kind of things. It would make it easier for artists in their taxes.
All right, I'll speed through these last few things, but we're going to talk a little bit about elections and then about how you can get involved, and then we'll take your questions at the end of the webinar. So, as Manny mentioned, we have a midterm election coming up this year. Now, we don't have any major seats at play in Washington necessarily, but every single House member is up for re-election. So this is really important for you as a voter and a cultural advocate. So here's what you should keep in mind and what you should do. First, vote. Please, please, please vote. It is so, so important. This is our civic duty. And please make sure you're voting in both the primary and in the general election. And on top of that, you need to get out the vote. Texting your friends, your family, bugging them about sending in their mail-in ballots is really important. I recently bugged a friend who wasn't planning to vote because they were too busy with work, and I got them to vote in a very critical election. So this does work. I promise you should do it. The next thing you should do is really vote with the cultural sector in mind. We often, especially towards the end of the year, will publish a congressional report card to let you know how your representative has been voting and if they've been voting with culture in mind. So that's a tool you can use. But you can also look up folks' voting records. You can take meetings with them, look at their election platform, see if they're talking about culture in there, and use that as a piece of your voting decision when you fill out your ballot. There are also lots of voter education activities that you can either create, lead, or attend in your community. If you're interested in hosting a candidate forum, we have a toolkit for this on our Inspiration League website that you can access. It's a great way, and it works for communities of all sizes, from very small towns to bigger cities. There might be an existing candidate forum or town hall. You should go attend that. You should go ask the candidates your burning questions about the cultural sector. You can also create or distribute nonpartisan educational information about all of the candidates to encourage people to get out the vote. And I'm sure there are lots of things I'm not thinking of either. And remember, yes, we've just spent this entire time talking about Congress and the federal government, but you should and can get involved at any election on any level of government, from city all the way up to Congress and anything in between. So if there's a race you particularly care about, an issue you really care about, no matter where it is, you should jump in and get involved in that election. And finally, just mentally prepare yourself that we could see a big shakeup at the end of this year. We could see one or even both chambers flip power. And in that case, they would be on the opposite side of the party line from the president. And how will that determine who is the chair of a committee, who has more power, which bills can get blocked or passed? That is something that we should be keeping in mind. So just leading up to that, remembering to stay in touch with your lawmaker, whether that's via email, via action alerts, via taking in-person meetings with their district staff, is a great way to set the stage for when that happens, if that happens. And what can you do? You can respond to any upcoming action alerts through the Inspiration League. I'll talk about the Inspiration League in a second. And you can also champion Inspiration League signups. You can send the link to join to your friends, to your family. I challenge you to send it to 10 people today. See if they'll sign up. You can also reach out directly to candidates and educate them on cultural issues, whatever cultural issue matters to you. You can build or sustain a relationship with your congressional district office. Again, there's a DC office and there's a district office. Your district office is going to be in your home district, so you can go say hi in person. You can grab coffee. You can call them. You can email them. But finally, this is all really stressful. There's a lot of chaos happening in the federal government. So remember to take care of yourself and lean on your community through all of this great work that you're doing. Let's talk a little bit about the Inspiration League. This is Inspire Washington's advocacy platform, and you can take a minimum of just 2 clicks to raise your voice. The first click is to open the action alert in your email, and the second one is to hit send. Now, of course, you are welcome to do a little bit more work than that if you'd like. So here's what an action alert looks like. On the left side of my screen, you'll see an example. This is a slightly old action alert from last year when we were worried about the future of the National Endowment of the Humanities. So we will do a big breakdown of what's going on, summarize it for you that you can read. And then after that, you'll fill out your contact information. Our system will filter it so that it will go exactly to the lawmaker it needs to go to on the correct level of government. It identifies your district. And then we have written a pre-written message. You are allowed to change that, or you can leave it exactly as is. But of course, we encourage you to take a little bit of time, if you have it, to write at least 1 or 2 personal sentences at the top of the message, just so that it doesn't get flagged as spam by accident in the office's inbox. But of course, again, if you don't have time, it's still totally worth it to just open it and hit send without writing your message, whatever you need to do for your level of busyness in this life. And then that'll send your message to your representative, as well as all the other folks in your district who've done this as well. Our Inspiration League members are super active, and we've actually heard from staffers, I want to say on the state level, Jesse, you can back me up on this, who, when we've done state action alerts, have really noticed that we've shown up and shown out in really large numbers. So this is working. It is absolutely worth it. It is not a waste of your time, and it's really easy. And finally, you can help us out by becoming an invested member of Inspire Washington. We have, of course, we have partners of all stripes, whether they're paid or not, that we are here to support and work with. But we do have a coalition of dues-paying members who invest in our work so that we can give back and support culture. We have individual member levels, so you can start at 50 or pay what you will, or if you're an organization, you can join on that level, and we have a whole budget breakdown based on what your annual expenses are, or whether you're inside of King County or outside of King County. But they're pretty modest. The vast majority of our members or organizations out there are only going to be paying about $100 to $250. So you can join on our website, inspirewashington.org.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Here's our contact information on the slide. You're more than welcome to reach out to any of us about any other questions you may have. We're going to stop the recording here now, and then we'll just stop sharing and then open it up to any questions that you may have.